Where is the internal life of these characters? Where is their internal conflict? We were so concerned about the spectacle and showing how we can perfectly recreate some of these iconic moments. And I know people want that. But that's the difference that could have made an enjoyable film an epic film. A film deserving of the king of pop. The Michael movie. Fans are giving it standing ovations. Critics are calling it not worthy of the king of pop. So who's right? I've been watching both reactions pile up, and what's interesting is that they're not actually disagreeing about the same film. The fans are responding to the performance. The performances were excellent, so accurate down to the letter. They had their problems, of course, but the critics are responding to the film around it. And from where I sit, watching this as someone who is serious about acting, who has been acting for over 20 years and writing films to a lesser degree, both groups have a point. They're just talking past each other. So here's what we're doing today. We're not doing a fan defense. We're not doing a critical takedown. We're going through this with my perspective as an entertainment professional, because that's where the real story is. Let's start off with Jaafar Jackson. Jaafar Jackson's physical performance is impressive in ways that most coverage isn't equipped to explain. The technical performance that he put on, he almost embodied Michael Jackson physically, vocally, in so many different ways. But Jaafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, taking on the role of his uncle, physically fit the role, and actually I can't really think of many other people that could have pulled off what he did. Even some of the Michael Jackson performers that are out here now that probably think that their whole life is Michael Jackson. I don't know that they could have done it. Because there's something in the timbre of Michael's voice that is very specific to the Jackson family. And I feel like Jaafar actually really embodied that. He used that. That was a secret weapon of his, the actual tone of his voice. And I can tell he has a good ear for listening, because he's listened to some of these interviews probably of his uncle and was able to convey that persona. Because I want to talk about that too. That's something that I really miss from this film. We always see these videos that have been going around the past few years of Michael's real voice.
Okay. Right. Somebody has to turn it off then. If he leaves the guitar there, would somebody turn it off? They'll remember? I wish you could trash it. See? See? Can we Can we try it just one more time?
And that's the core of what I think is missing here. Michael had an exterior presence, he had a public-facing persona, and then he had his personal life. I really wish this film would have went deeper into his personal life. Like, I wanted to know the real Michael, the man behind some of these, what some would say are ruthless decisions, you know, from getting the Sony ATV catalog from Paul McCartney. That wasn't even covered in the film, believe it or not. To firing his manager, who also happened to be his father, Joe Jackson. We're going to talk about that too. Coleman Domingo turns in a great performance as Joe Jackson, but he is limited by the script and the constraints that were put on this film. But that's going to be a reoccurring theme in this review. The film around them keeps undermining the great physical and character work these actors are doing. They're up there working hard, but they can only work as hard as the script is good. And this script was penned by John Logan, the writer of The Aviator, Gladiator, Skyfall, films like that. Pretty big budget films. But that being said, there was obviously a lot of cooks in the kitchen on the producer side. The producers, John Branca, who was Michael Jackson's attorney, Graham King, who did the Bohemian Rhapsody, and so many other films. But I do feel like this script and the estate's presence were at odds at times. And you could kind of tell it in the writing and how this story came together. I'm sure the estate locked in a lot of the narrative choices that would be covered in this film, especially the time period. We get early Michael Jackson from Gary, Indiana. They kind of rushed through it in the first 30 minutes or so, and then we're an adult Michael Jackson, which makes me think, why didn't we start with adult Michael Jackson? We've already had the Jacksons, The American Dream, which stands as a high watermark in performances and execution from the 1990s. A great film, a great TV miniseries that really got to go in depth of the family's story. That was missing a lot. And I think they almost wanted to tell more of the family story. And I think that's what that early part was, his relationships with his brothers. But we missed a lot of that because they were being very careful not to either tread on territory that's already been done, possibly, or to take the focus off of Michael, So, but when the movie starts kicking and Jaafar is adult Michael, young Michael Jackson, he was okay. He had some problems, like there was, I don't know what it was exactly about. And this is no slight to the young actor that played Michael Jackson. He was great in ways. It seemed like he was very mechanical. He was very rehearsed. And it didn't seem very lived in when he got to the performance parts of Michael Jackson's life. Michael was a star from day one. Let's just be honest. And even though he had to work very hard and constantly pushed himself into the point of being a perfectionist sometimes, it feels like that part of him in this film is totally missing. And it was definitely missing in that early section there. There was even questionable, if you remember back to the original film, Diana Ross is the one that introduces the Jacksons. And as having parents that were around during that time period, my mother actually had the record that they released. Berry Gordy and Motown were a well-oiled machine, and they had an album with Diana Ross introduces the Jackson 5. So that was a missed opportunity. I don't know. I'm assuming Diana Ross didn't want anything to do with the film, didn't want any involvement. Maybe after she heard some resistance from family members like Janet Jackson, who was not in the film at all, which, let me tell you, as anybody who knows this story, is a big gaping hole. It's a Janet-sized hole in this film. And I think Paris Jackson also had some issues with certain parts of this film. But overall, they did what they could. And I think that really goes into why they had such a hard time actually completing this film. There was a bunch of reshoots and, I'm sure the narrative was changed and people had to adjust and fly and figure out how to fix this film. It's a monumental task. I'm not going to say it. This is the king of pop. There is no stretch of the imagination where you can't say this is a difficult task, where you can go into this easily. And that is my criticism of it, is that was this film a epic enough representation of the king of pop? Such a monumental figure. You have people fainting in countries, grown men fainting in the audience when Michael Jackson would perform. Like that essence, that scale, largesse was missing. And I don't know if it was a budgetary thing, like how do you really do that? But I think they had a $150 million budget. The budget was $155 million. So you can imagine the scale of things, right? Why were they not able to make that into what it needed to be? And let me just say, when you got that kind of budget, a lot of things can happen. But one thing you got to nail is the special effects and CGI. This film had a CGI problem. we're not just going to talk about the fact that there's a, I don't know, there's a CGI version of Bubbles, which I get it. Working with animals is a difficult task. They say don't ever work with babies and animals, but it just took you out. If you're going to have to do that and you want to make Bubbles this kind of cute and lovable character, maybe there's some marketing opportunity that they wanted to not miss out on. But the fact that they made this cartoonish almost version of Bubbles that was getting into mischief in the house, and but not too much mischief, right? Not tearing up stuff like a monkey probably would. Now or chimp probably would. I think Bubbles was a chimp. But if you're gonna go there, please tell the full story of Bubbles. At the end of later in Bubbles' life, Bubbles just disappeared, right? Michael used to have Bubbles on the red carpet with him. He used to be in pictures with him, photo shoots. But after a while, Bubbles got mean. And that's what he said. You know, Michael has said that Bubbles was too mean in his old age. And that's one thing. These chimps have superhuman strength. And I think there was a woman that got her face torn off by one of them. You know what I'm saying? So there is some serious implications behind that. But like I said, if you're going to go there, go all the way. Tell Bubbles' whole story arc from beginning to end, because that would be interesting. There were some great performances out here. Like Jaafar Jackson, like I said, was great. Coleman Domingo had a great performance as Joe Jackson. He was menacing, but not, he couldn't go the full way, obviously, because of the nature of this film. I don't think the film was supposed to not depict any of the violence, even though they did have a couple moments there to drive home the point that there was some discipline in that home that went along with the performance, you know, and Michael in some ways fearing Joe. So yeah, there was that, but it still didn't get to the level it could have gotten to, right? Coleman is an interesting performer because he's very understated at times, but he's very talented and can also be very humorous. He could also be very broad, as in the theater performer that he is. I know from personal experience because Coleman's beat me out for a couple roles. I'm not gonna lie. He's right in my era. I love to see what's happening to his career now at this point. But what people don't really understand about this is the performances are the strong suit of this film and should have been focused on. You've already got Graham King as the producer who's done these big music-related films. This film would have been better as a musical or a musical experience. You know, like that kind of would have been where I thought they were going with it when they first said it. But bigger, you know what I'm saying? It had to be bigger. And since we went into the drama and the life of Michael, you got to make this little intimate film, you know, because I think about Antoine Fuqua as well as the director. Antoine Fuqua is an excellent director. Let's just say that. He directed one of my favorite films, Training Day. He also directed The Equalizer, Southpaw, the list goes on. When I saw Antoine Fuqua and knowing the grittiness of the films that he makes, I would have never expected him to make this film that we got. You know, that was disappointing in some ways because he really, if they had let him do what he wanted to do, which, you know, I think about Training Day and the scene with Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington sitting face to face in a diner and just dialogue going back and forth and allowing Denzel to improv and figure out things. I guess with such a delicate subject matter, he didn't have that freedom, and it kind of showed. And, you know, also, when you have film directors that are used to making more dramatic and realistic stories, when they have to do a big epic film, sometimes it doesn't usually translate to their strengths. You know, like the intensity was missing sometime in this film, and it just kind of left you wanting more. And that could have been totally a producer. That could have been totally a producer decision because, like I said, they shot possibly a whole nother film. So I can't wait for any Blu-ray or special edition that comes out of this or a re-release of this film in the director's full format. This film ran at about 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 27 minutes. So it was a limited view. And so when you have the decision made to only make one film here, and you only got one film, you got 2 hours and 27 minutes, which is not a short film, you have to be precise and you should just look into what period you want to focus on. There could have been a 2 hour, 20-minute movie about several points in this film. One in particular was the creation of the Off the Wall album, Off the Wall to Thriller, and his relationship with Quincy Jones, which I thought was kind of brushed over. Quincy Jones is played by Kendrick Sampson from Insecure. He puts in a kind of relaxed and overly casual Quincy Jones, which I think he unfortunately misses that passion that Quincy had for the music. Like Quincy was a cool cat, but he was serious about his jazz. He was serious about his music. So that unfortunately was a miss. But that little era, that recording session, all that could have been one whole movie. And so when you add the rushed over 1960s to 80s with the Jackson 5, you start wanting more out of that. You want more detail. You want something new to be known. And that's the thing too. People are saying no spoilers. How could you spoil Michael Jackson's life? All of this stuff is here. And especially in this film, we're not getting any revelations that we never heard of from Michael Jackson's life story. That's unfortunate. But let's start with one of the moments I really enjoyed. One of the performances I enjoyed was the Motown 25 performance, because that's the clip that was released to everyone. And, it's an amazing performance because it's so pivotal in Michael Jackson's story, right? Michael Jackson didn't just execute a new move called the moonwalk. He made you wait for the moonwalk. There's a stillness right before it that happens, and then the floor and the world was changed. But, that stillness that Jaafar once again nails is the hardest part to replicate. But I will say, this film, once again, had a lot of shaky camera footage in order to break it up from the original clip that we all know and love. And some of it didn't look right because of maybe not enough people being on set. It did seem like they had a problem getting actual bodies in these locations. There was a lot of, once again, CGI in these audiences that kind of took me out of it again. You know what I'm saying? But Jaafar is excellent in replicating the move, down to when Michael was disappointed that he wasn't able to stand on his toes for long enough and kind of falls a little bit, which he was able to later fix in later incarnations of the moonwalk that we all know and love. So yeah, that detail work that Jaafar did is on screen, and Jaafar is holding it down for real. That separates him from every other MJ tribute performance that we've seen or impersonator that we've seen on stage or in a movie. He studied more than just the choreography. He learned the internal logic of how Michael Jackson's body moved, And that's what set Jaafar's performance of Michael Jackson's dance vocabulary apart from the young man who played young Michael Jackson. His name is Giuliano Valdi. But he's got a bright future. He's in a #1 box office film that's already at $217 million box office. And it just opened last week. So it's already a success. On a $155 million budget, to get your budget back in full worldwide is crazy. Like that, this is a hit. This is what I'm saying. The dichotomy of what audiences felt just your casual moviegoer and what the critics are saying. So, yeah, my major issue always goes back to the script and how this script could have been written differently, how more allowances could have been left for us to make some assumptions to challenge the film, to challenge people's memory of Michael and what it is. You've got the perfect actor, some would say, to play Michael. And you've got a great Joe Jackson. You got an understated Nia Long. I wish they had given her so much more to do. Do you know how much Michael Jackson loved his mother? And to make her almost a side character is a travesty. It really was. And this is not, like I said, this is not taking anything away from Nia Long's performance, because Nia Long was given a job and she completed it. She did it to the best of her ability. But so much was missing when you think about the impact of Michael Jackson's mother on his life and the interior life. Like, I got no regret from Michael doing any nose job. They talked about the nose job situation. There was a little moment where he did it, then they showed he did it, then he came home and Joe talked to him about it. Where is the internal life of these characters? Where is their internal conflict? We were so concerned about the spectacle and showing how we can perfectly recreate some of these iconic moments. And I know people want that. But that's the difference that could have made an enjoyable film an epic film. A film deserving of the king of pop. But either way, those are just some of my thoughts on it. I can go more in depth. We could talk about this for an hour or two, but shout out to everybody involved. Shout out to the Jackson family. I think there's a lot of people that will be exposed to Michael Jackson that never would have gotten this exposure. There are kids now that are finally listening to Michael Jackson's music, practicing dance moves. This generation already loves the dance, which is interesting because the last few generations probably weren't the best dancers. But now we got another generation inspired. And that's another takeaway of this film, But anyway, do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification for all uploads. If you want to watch more, please watch one of these videos down below. Make sure you sign up for the Faucette Media Patreon. You can also get the back catalog of this channel on that Patreon. So make sure you sign up for the Patreon. The link is in the description. This is Faucette Media.